Hi, friends. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have you here. We have a very informative webinar planned for you. My name is Ashish Joy. I lead marketing here at UpCodes. I'm joined today by Ninad Garware and John Rumohr. Ninad is a customer success manager here at UpCodes. He's also a licensed architect who has designed multiple projects spanning urban design and master planning, mixed-use developments, high-rise residential projects, commercial developments, and more. He's been at firms like HOK, Handel Architects, and Curtis and Ginsberg Architects. John is a principal and senior mechanical engineer for IGNYTE Design PLLC. He is a registered professional engineer licensed in multiple states. He specializes in campus infrastructure and central utilities for healthcare, higher education, government, and large commercial clients. He has extensive experience working with facilities management teams on large central utility plants, helping them to assess existing systems, plan for future capital projects, and maximize the return on their investments. When John isn't analyzing chiller plants, he's spending time outside with his wife and two daughters. He's passionate about gardening, camping, woodworking, and classic cards. We're really excited to have John here, Ninad as well, myself. We're really excited to get this webinar going with you today. Here's a quick overview of what we've planned for today. We'll take some time to tell you more about UpCodes, what's included in the platform, and the value our users are finding. We'll spend a majority of our time learning about UpCodes Copilot and then show you how to jump in and get started yourself. And then we'll take some time to talk with John from IGNYTE Design. After that, we've saved some time at the end for your questions. So feel free to add in questions at any time during the webinar via the Q&A button in your Zoom window. So let's just take a couple minutes to look at the UpCodes platform. Historically, we developed UpCodes to help you determine code requirements for your projects. This happened through our expanding code library with over 6 million sections of code and dedicated workflows to parse regulations. And now, in 2024, we reintroduced UpCodes as a single platform for codes, assemblies, and building products research. You now have powerful tools to help with compliance and product research. With UpCodes, you have this unified library over 6.7K city, state, and federal codes, over 1,800 detailed diagrams that illustrate code requirements, over 12,000 UL, GA, and UpCodes assemblies, and over 70,000 building products across a wide range of CSI divisions. On top of that, UpCodes also gives you access to powerful tools like Copilot, Search, Projects, which help accelerate your design to construction. Let's take a look at those 4 libraries that make up the UpCodes ecosystem. First up is Code Library. Code Library is your reliable and up-to-date source for adopted codes. We have over 6,700 city, state, and federal codes, over 209,000 local amendments, over 80 plus jurisdictions hosted, and over 7,000 code sections updated monthly by our content team. So with Code Library, you have seamless access to codes. You can compare codes by jurisdiction or code year, and you can filter those codes by name, year, or publication. Second, UpCodes includes a growing diagrams library. These are high-fidelity diagrams that illustrate complex code requirements. With Diagrams Library, you can visually unpack the codes to gain a clear understanding of what the code is saying. You can also filter through the diagrams and view related code sections that correspond to those diagrams. Third, UpCodes includes an assemblies library. Assemblies library is the best way to modernize your assembly research and accelerate your design to construction. We currently host over 12,000 UL, GA, and UpCodes assemblies on our platform. With Assemblies Library, you can scan assemblies with easy-to-read titles, surface assemblies faster and more efficiently, and curate the assemblies that correspond and match your project criteria. Finally, UpCodes includes Products Library. Products Library helps simplify product discovery and selection and includes over 70,000 building products, with more coming and more resources coming in the weeks and months ahead. With Products Library, you gain product awareness and context, and you now have a single place to store products and collaborate, and you can easily contact the manufacturer or order product samples. So that's a quick overview of the UpCodes platform. And now we're going to take some time to dig into UpCodes Copilot. You'll learn why we think AI is a game changer for your day-to-day responsibilities and how it can augment and enhance your abilities. You'll learn about why we built Copilot and how we believe it can accelerate your code and assembly research. So with that, let me hand things over to Ninad. Take it away, Ninad.
Thank you, Ashish, for the great intro, and welcome to our webinar, everyone. A special thanks to John as he patiently waits as I talk through the next few slides. Before I jump into Copilot, I want to do a quick overview of the artificial intelligence landscape in the AEC industry today. So I graduated with the Master's in Architecture and Urban Design from Pratt Institute in New York back in 2011. Pratt, for those of you who know, is extremely invested in the marriage of advanced technology and design. I remember working with software I had never heard of before. Maya, Rhinoceros, Grasshopper, Dynamo, the list was endless. And the reason I mention this is because the development of these types of solutions has always been aimed at solving inefficiencies, allowing us to focus our time and attention on the development of our actual designs. A very basic example of this is Revit, of course. You can model spaces, and in doing so, you have other drawings, RCPs, plans, elevations generated almost instantaneously, not to mention all of the data that's contained within the model itself, data such as products and materials, square footages, occupancies, and quantities and schedules. Take that a step further with generative design, which allows you to develop design options based on parameters you control, or allow your design to be controlled by external factors such as the weather outside a building, for example. So advanced design tech has allowed us to focus on other important aspects of the built environment that we as AEC professionals directly affect. The next step of this evolution has been the adoption of artificial intelligence in its various forms. And it has so many different forms. If you have used any of the tools that you see on screen here, you probably know that even though there is a learning curve, that curve is so much more reasonable than something like transitioning from two-dimensional CAD drawings to three-dimensional BIM modeling. There are a lot of wonderful websites out there that capture a lot of what's happening in the AI AEC industry, and I implore you to take a look at them. And all of that to say that we are heavily invested in the use of artificial intelligence here at UpCodes. Why? One, we see it as the next step in the evolution of technology, not very different from what has happened in the past, such as stepping away from manually coordinating and hand drawing multiple sheets to using computer-aided design software to leveraging BIM models. The use of three-dimensional printers to supplement handmade models, and the use of real-time rendering software like Enscape and Revit, if you use that, versus exporting PNGs from Rhino and rendering them in Photoshop. If you know, you know. Quite a bit of my time in my initial years in the industry was spent doing exactly that. We see the use of AI as a natural step in the industry. Two is the volume of data we're looking at. I'm sure this photo looks very familiar to you, whether you're an architect, engineer, or a building official. Like Ashish has mentioned, UpCodes hosts codes for over 80 jurisdictions across the country. We have a content team that is dedicated to making sure that the content is up to date and accurate. We developed code diagrams that help you understand the intent of the code. We host over 12,000 UL assembly and other assembly illustrations. We also have an enormous building material and product library. All in all, we host over 6 million sections of code across 6,700 code books with over 209,000 amendments, over 12,000 assemblies, over 70,000 building products, and over 7,000 content updates ship out from our product every month. So as we understand it, UpCodes is a perfect use case for a large language model. Reason number 3 is our users. 1 million people across the country access UpCodes every month. We expect this to grow exponentially over the next few years, and we are always looking for ways to make it easier for our users to not only make their design processes and workflows efficient and accurate. We cater to a wide variety of audiences, from AEC firms to government agencies, from facilities management teams at universities to private developers. And we will leverage technology that can help each and every one of our users in any way they need it. And artificial intelligence allows us to do that. So let's start by talking about what problems or inefficiencies we're trying to solve here. One is content. We often rely on various sources like AHJ website, manufacturer websites, online libraries, or outdated hard copies of codes, leading to a tedious path of information gathering. Communication through in-person meetings, emails, or online messaging can result in fragmented information or potential miscommunication. The process is often inefficient due to scattered storage on servers, PDFs, notepads, CAD, Revit sheets, and that complicates information retrieval and management. Context switching. working across multiple tools to perform one task, Smartsheet, Word, Excel, Bluebeam, Revit sheets. That can slow down progress and increase the risk of errors when they're used separately. Manual calculations also pose problems. Relying on hand calculations or outdated Excel files can lead to incorrect assumptions or imprecise results. Historical information. Efficient access to historical data is essential, but tracking past decisions and their context can be challenging, impacting continuity and consistency. And here is where we can leverage the use of AI. UpCodes Copilot is a GPT-powered AI research assistant. We launched Copilot back in 2023, and it has been adopted by a lot of our customers as a solution to the antiquated problem that comes down to one seemingly basic question. What do I need to do to build a code-compliant building? Copilot has also been consistently scoring well on professional licensure examinations, something that has surprised us in the process. One of the benefits for us, as well as that for our users, is that Copilot is built to be modular, or to put it in simple terms. If we find a more powerful, efficient, and cost-efficient AI model out there, we can swap out what we have with it, ensuring that our users can leverage the best technology there is for their needs. And what separates Copilot from other AI-powered chatbots is the foundation that it is actually built on. The large data sets that I spoke about earlier are what Copilot is trained on, and it ties in neatly into workflows you may already be familiar with on UpCodes. The ability to surface critical knowledge, share this information with team members, and create a streamlined documentation process so you don't have to rinse and repeat the process every time you have a question. In a survey in 2023, we asked users to share how much time they've saved using UpCodes tools, including Copilot, and the results were revealing. Users reported saving up to 4 hours a month because of Copilot. Now multiply that by the number of employees or team members you have, and you can easily see how this cost-effective solution can positively impact your bottom line by saving you time and allowing you to focus resources on other critical tasks. So now let's dive into Copilot, into UpCodes, and see how Copilot really works. We try to make it really easy to access Copilot. While you are scrolling through the codes, you may notice a little toolbar that shows up on the top right of code sections. Now, while those tools are on UpCodes, there is also a Copilot button here that allows you to access Copilot. Copilot can also be accessed by clicking on the large button on the left toolbar. Now, like I said, Copilot is trained on the libraries that we host. So before using Copilot, we do ask that you select a couple of filters on the left. Some of the optional filters include sources if you want to narrow down your Copilot training data to just codes and diagrams or just assemblies. You do need to select a jurisdiction because, again, it's going to be looking specifically at that jurisdiction. You do need to select a code year, so Copilot knows what code year it should be looking at. And then you can choose optionally a building type and code books. What these filters do is essentially narrow down the training data that Copilot is using to generate the response. Now, how do you use Copilot? Copilot, if you used any other chatbot like ChatGPT or Gemini, works in the exact same way. It is here to assist you in your design process. You can ask Copilot a question. You can ask Copilot to find something for you. You can ask it to find an exception, for example. You can ask it to explain something to you. Really, you can use it in any way that you want to. Now, before I dive into what we are seeing on screen here, I do want to break it up into several parts. One is the prompt that you see up here. The responses that are generated on Copilot are heavily dependent on the prompt that you see up here and the prompt that you provide. The more detailed the prompt, the more information you provide Copilot on the get-go, the better the response. Second is the response itself. The response is text-based, but it pulls in any code sections that may have been referenced while generating the response. It gives you a detailed breakdown based on your prompt, and it also asks you for additional detail in case it feels that it does not have enough information to provide an accurate enough response. Reference sections. These are sections or sources that Copilot has used to generate the response. Now, this is actually a really critical part of the Copilot response, along with the text that's generated up here. These sections can actually be clicked on for you to be able to view the requirements of the code section right here. These sections can also be opened up in a new tab. You can share a link to that particular code section with someone by clicking on copy link. And you can bookmark code sections to your projects. If you're familiar with bookmarking and commenting, this ties in neatly to your workflow that already exists. We cite up to 10 sections, but you can always ask Copilot to list a more thorough set of code sections that it has referenced while it has generated a response. And the last part of this particular response is the diagrams and illustrations. As you know, UpCodes develops our own code diagrams. These are UpCodes' interpretation of the code. And the way it works is Copilot actually uses some of the text that's in the overview right here to link to the answer that it has generated, but it also pulls in diagrams based on the code sections that have been referenced right here. So diagrams that you see up here may not necessarily be directly relevant, but they are pulled in because they are linked to the code sections that you see here. Now let's talk about how you can use Copilot. So we asked it a question, this is a basic question about an office building. I asked it what type of occupancy groups I need to be aware of. And now I want to get in more detail. So let's say I'm thinking about adding a horizontal building separation to my design. A very simple way to do that is to follow up with a question. Now that's important because Copilot is able to actually continue a conversation. It is supposed to be a conversational tool. So it remembers the answer that was previously provided. The answer that it generates now is built on top of that answer. I'm going to go ahead and review this answer and also ask it an additional question, something about unconcentrated furniture and assembly type occupancies. You can see that Copilot is still continuing to generate a response based on its previous responses, but it's also, most importantly, staying in the same jurisdiction with the same filters. So that's really important. Now, what we can do with a particular response, again, going back to tying into your current workflows on UpCodes, the same way that you have bookmarked code sections that has been referenced back to your project, you can actually bookmark an entire conversation that you're having with Copilot to a project. And that will save it for you for later use in case you want to go back and track any design decisions you may have made based on a response that you received on Copilot. A couple of best practices that I do want to talk about because Copilot does have some limitations. One is if you are changing topics, if you are right now I'm asking questions about occupancies or horizontal separations. If I want to change topics and let's say talk about energy, ask questions about energy, I do recommend you clear your chat. And the reason being that Copilot has some difficulty disconnecting between conversations. Once you clear your chat, you're starting from scratch. The second is prompts. Now, I did mention that prompting is really important. Let's look at an example of what that means. So I'm going to ask Copilot a question. The only filters that I have selected right now are my sources, my jurisdiction, and the code year. I have not selected the building type or code book. Let's say I type in a question asking Copilot to summarize textile wall covering requirements. Now, as you can imagine, the prompt that I provided is very vague. It's just a very general prompt. There's no real description within it about a building type or where it needs to look. What Copilot is going to do at this point is it will pull in references from all over the code for Wyoming for the current year. So you can look, you can see that there's mechanical code sections here, building code sections here. So it's really pulling in code sections from all over the place. Another example of this is to be able to provide Copilot a location to look at. So let's say you type in summarize textile wall covering requirements for the building code. Now, when you do that, Copilot has a direction. So now it knows that you're asking it a question specific to the building code. It would work the same way if you have a building code book selected on the left. So instead of selecting a code book, all I've done is actually insert it in the prompt. And now when you go down to your sources, you can see that the sources are all concentrated to the building code. One thing to note is that the responses or the code sections that are pulled up here may not be directly related to your response. Even if it is a second degree connection, it will pull up those code sections. So it's still not as precise as I want it to be. Now, what I can do in that case is to be able to go back to a code section. So let's say I am looking at a specific code section, let's say 80305 or something like that, where we're talking about textile wall coverings. This is where the Copilot icon comes into play. When you ask Copilot a question directly from the code viewer, Copilot has a source to go to. Now, this is a pretty simple section. 803.5 was a very small section. So it's able to summarize it really well. But you can actually ask Copilot to summarize larger sections or ask questions about larger sections directly from that window. And what that does is it pinpoints to Copilot exactly what the location that you needed to look at. And that is useful in use cases where you actually know where those sections exist and you just want it to explain something to you. Otherwise, you can, if you do not specify a section, Copilot will actually be able to pull up sections for you and link them in the reference sections down here. So you can see in this case, there's just one reference section, and that's because I have asked Copilot a question about that specific section in the code viewer. I want to quickly talk about how you can view Copilot responses as well, so that you have bookmarked. So let's say I have created a specific project, and I have bookmarked Copilot responses there. Here are all of my bookmark Copilot responses that have been saved to my project here. What's nice about this is you can actually click on a specific response. It will show you the prompt as well as the response that's been generated. But more importantly, it'll actually show you any comments that have been attached to Copilot responses. And this is really helpful in the use case where you're working with a junior designer, you give them access to Copilot, but you want them to verify a particular response by you before using it as a basis of design. So you can actually ask them to tag a comment every time they bookmark a Copilot response back to your project, and then tag you. So you can tag as many people as you want, as long as they are collaborators in the project, and you can ask them to type in a comment. This will shoot Gabriella, in this case, an email saying she's been tagged in a particular response with a link to this response, so she can review it and then sign off on it or use it as a basis of design, just depending on what her role is on the project. The other smaller feature in here is by clicking this little button here, it actually brings up the conversation in your Copilot window. So you can sort of continue, the trail of questions that you've been asking it, you can continue asking additional questions. So this is a high-level summary of Copilot. What are things Copilot is not good at? One is reading from equations and tables. We do not believe that Copilot has the ability to read tables and equations really well at this moment. But like I said, if we find that an engine is better at doing that, we can easily switch it out or update the engine. Right now, it isn't there. So I wouldn't use Copilot for any complex calculation. So let's say, for example, you're trying to find out plumbing fixture counts. I would stay away from using Copilot. I would defer to using the code calculator that we have built within projects. The other thing is sometimes the responses may be a little vague. Something that I can definitely recommend, apart from using some of these filters, managing your prompts, is ask Copilot to list any assumptions it's made. Ask it to show you the calculations that it's done. And so in that manner, you can actually identify any gaps, any problems in the information that you've provided, so that you can fill in those gaps or correct that information, and Copilot will be able to generate a better response. So these are the many ways in which you can use Copilot. If you do not have a subscription to Copilot, try it out. I think everyone gets the 3 free questions, or reach out to us. We're happy to set up a trial for you where you have unlimited access to Copilot. And that's what I had to present today. I do want to thank John again for waiting all this time. And I would like to introduce him to you now. Hey, John. Oh, I think you may be on mute.
Hit the right button. Thanks.
No problem. Thanks for waiting so patiently as I walk through Copilot. You're a Copilot pro, so I'm sure you've done all of this before.
Absolutely. I was playing along in the background.
Oh, that's great. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and your firm?
Yep, absolutely. So my name is John Rumohr. I'm a senior mechanical engineer and one of the 5 partners and principals at IGNYTE Design. I've been in the industry close to 20 years at this point. IGNYTE is a newer firm. We are a MEP consulting only firm. We're a little over 2.5 years old at this point. We've got 21 design professionals, and we focus on mechanical, electrical, and plumbing design systems. Doing work currently across the country in a little over 22 states, but pretty much able to be licensed anywhere in the country. And we've been fortunate enough to actually have a couple of projects outside the country already too.
Wow.
But my main focus is, as Ashish mentioned earlier, for the greater part of my career has been in higher ed, healthcare, and I'd say large commercial clients, Fortune 500 companies, typically with large campus type facilities. So my expertise really lays kind of in the campus built environment.
Fantastic. And so what other types of projects does your firm handle other than higher ed and some of the other typologies you just mentioned?
Yep. So a fair amount of what IGNYTE's been doing is we also do a lot of K-12 education work. That's mainly based in Michigan with a little bit in Indiana. IGNYTE does have two offices, one in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and one in Kalamazoo, Michigan. But in addition to the healthcare and education side of things, we also have a very strong industrial component and commercial component where either we're doing prototype type facilities for brands that we all know and love around the country, or some of the largest pharmaceutical manufacturers in the country, as well as chemical manufacturers that we're, again, campus type environments where we're in their facilities. And our team is built on relationships, so it's building relationships with those facility managers and being really extensions of their facilities team, being in their plants, being on their campuses on a day-to-day basis, helping them with their everyday problems that are coming up as they're trying to manage and operate those facilities effectively and efficiently.
Got it. That's quite a gamut to span across all those different project types and also location, just outside.
It is a big gamut. We like to joke that we kind of work in pretty much everything except nuclear right now. It's kind of the running joke in the firm.
Yeah, yeah. And so, like, given all of that, and you said you were just 21 people, which is also amazing to hear. How do people in your firm leverage UpCodes to the best of its potential, given the type of work you do across the country and internationally?
Yeah, so our firm, we love using UpCodes with that, and as you mentioned, with Copilot, and the fact that we're doing work in states across the country, multiple jurisdictions. When I first started in my career, having to have hard copy code books for all the different jurisdictions that we're working in and knowing how to manually go through all of that. Now with UpCodes and with Copilot, all of that's right at our fingertips so that we're able to quickly and easily make sure we're applying the right codes for the right jurisdictions that we're in. One of the things I was playing around with the past couple of days is some comparative code analysis through UpCodes. Again, I kind of mentioned we do some prototype facilities for clients. One may be in downtown Chicago, Illinois, and one's in San Diego, California. I run a quick code compare and say, hey, what's the major differences between these two codes? And it gives me a bullet pointed list. So that gives me a good key, or the team a good key, of what can we look at changing in our design to make it sure it fits and still complies with that different jurisdiction that, relatively the same building or same project is still happening.
Yeah, that's really good to know. And I'm guessing that people also have their fingers in different projects at the same time. It's not necessarily just working in one typology. They're working all over the place, given how big your scope is.
Yes. Yeah. Being able to, bounce in and out of different typologies, and again, kind of do that quick Copilot search of, hey, where would I look for this? And having it, pinpoint us and then be able to link directly to that code section for that municipality or jurisdiction is a huge help to our team.
Fantastic. What would you say are the top three use cases for Copilots in the firm? And it could be across anything. It could be search, it could be the codes themselves, like absolutely anything.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that we use it a lot for is initially that code search. What is the difference between the jurisdictions that we talked about? Early on in schematic design of a project, I've gone through and I've asked Copilot, I've got a 40,000 square foot facility that's an educational building in northern Indiana. What are rough load calculations, or what are you mentioned plumbing fixture counts. I've asked Copilot plumbing fixture counts, and they've come up fairly close, right? So again, for what we were using it for on the project at that beginning conceptual schematic phase, to be able to use it for that, it gives us the information that we need. So that's, saving a lot of time on our end early on in the front ends of the project, so we can get to spend more time delving into some of the details on other parts of the project.
Got it. That's super helpful to hear. Has anyone reported to you, hey, this is what we use UpCodes for, and we love it because of this reason? Are there any specific highlights that that you would know of that you can share with some of our viewers today?
I think the specific highlights, we've gone into a lot of, again, kind of since we're MEP based, some of the MEP codes and, asking specific questions around, again, very mundane to most people, grease interceptors or things like that get to be very nuanced between different municipalities or different jurisdictions. And it comes back with very good responses on that help us find those. Those end up being, major time savers for our team of literally days of labor in some cases on projects, where if we can get that information quickly and then quickly make a phone call to the local jurisdiction to go through that, that's a huge time saver and helps not only us, but helps our clients and the projects overall.
Yeah, that's great you mentioned that, because our aim with Copilot is to do exactly that. Set up a foundation that you can then build on. It's not going to be 100% precise because AI tools are not there yet, but we do recommend that everyone does their own research. But you're at least saving, if you spend 20 minutes doing code research on your own, you would save, 15 minutes because you would just use Copilot to surface the most important information for you. It sounds like you use Copilot yourself as well. Is that right?
I absolutely do. I'd say pretty much all facets of it as much as I can. Being that we're MEP focused, some of the assemblies and some of the specs we're not using quite as much yet as you and I have kind of discussed, but we're working towards that and looking forward to using that in the near future. But from codes and being able to not only look at the jurisdictional related, but the area where you have adoptions by all publishers, and we can specifically look at either ASHRAE codes or NFPA, different PA as we need to, different sections of NFPA, and how those relate to where we're working at, even if they may not be specifically related to our state, but they still apply and they're located in that area. It's saving us by not having to have that hard copy on the shelf and then trying to keep our hard copy updated.
Yeah, that sounds really great. What kind of advice would you give first-time Copilot users for someone who's just diving in, since you've used it so much? Things that they cannot do, should not do.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for using Copilot and UpCodes to start asking Copilot questions. I found, having a conversation with it takes probably a little bit of getting used to, but just start asking questions and it'll generate good questions back to just kind of continue that conversation to build upon the discussion and get to greater answers and greater granularity of what you're looking for.
Yeah. And this is more of a general question, as the industry navigates, in the introduction, application of AI in so many different forms, what in your opinion would be a dream application of AI at UpCodes using Copilot or not in some other
form? Right. As early adopters, we like to be on the cutting edge of technology as much as we can at our firm, using AI across the board. And you mentioned Dynamo and different ways we're trying to implement AI into Dynamo, into equipment selection and our quality control. But the biggest thing that still needs, I'd say, some more improvement on that is specifications and, trying to continue to improve the process of writing specifications. So I think linking AI between specifications and then our modeling is huge. We do have spec links within our models right now that help generate some spec to that, but it's not fully there yet. So I think to be able to have a AI link to that can have part of the conversation piece as well as the modeling piece together could really be powerful and help streamline the process for the industry, while also creating stronger, more accurate project specifications instead of just generic boilerplate that, unfortunately so frequently get issued across the industry.
Sure. And John already knows this, but for the viewers on our call, that's the tool we're actually working on. Next step for us from having all these codes, diagrams, assemblies, and building products is to develop a spec writing tool. If you are interested in demoing it, or if you're interested, we don't have built yet, but once we do have it built yet, if you're interested in demoing it, or you want to be a part of the team that provides us feedback as we develop it, definitely reach out to us. I know John's going to be on the list, so.
Yeah, can't wait.
Ashish, do we have any questions from the group?
Yeah, just a few here. Let me start with a more tactical one for you, Ninad. I think you mentioned that you can go to Copilot from a code section, or you can go directly to Copilot and filter down. Could you talk through those use cases and what's the better approach for like a user? Like what would be the path, the right path to take in both of those scenarios?
Yes, absolutely. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. Let me know if you see my screen okay, Ashish.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the couple of examples that I had given before, Copilot can be accessed through the code viewer is what we call it. The nice thing about that is what's happening on the back end is you are providing Copilot a direct link to a particular part of the code that you'd like to ask a question about. What you can do with Copilot from this view is kind of limited, but it helps a lot. So you can ask a code question about that particular section. You can ask it to explain the code section for you, perform a calculation in some cases, and then summarize the code section. Asking a code question about a specific code section will pull in references from all parts of the code book. Summarizing it or explaining it will keep it limited to that particular code section. But essentially it boils down to you knowing exactly where in the code you want to look for something and you need help with that something. When you use Copilot from the Copilot page, this use case is better for when you don't know where to look, or you're trying to find certain information, or using it as a more powerful search engine, right? So the previous example that I've given, actually, let me try a new example here. But let's say I'm interested in understanding the kinds of standpipes that there are. This is again a very generic question. It could really mean a lot of things, but I'm asking it to explain to me in the code, what the different classes of standpipes are or what types of standpipes there are as it is in the code. And then additionally, it will also pull in sections where it's got that information. So the source is there. So if I want to do some more research, I can actually click on these sections. And now this section has been surfaced to me. So I know I need to look there. So again, it's sort of inverse. Like when you use it within the code viewer, you know exactly where you want to look and you have a question about the code that's right there. And you use Copilot on the Copilot page when you want to try and surface something that you don't know exists or exists somewhere that you're not familiar with. So it'll pull in code sections from the fire code, from the building code. As an architect, I may not be as familiar with the mechanical code, for example, but this will give me a foundation on top of that, what I can build my research on.
Awesome. And then this was a question, Ninad, you can answer this too, but John, you had mentioned that your firm uses Code Compare to like analyze code sections between jurisdictions for your projects. Ninad, how does Code Compare, knowing that it's a separate feature, could you just quickly show Code Compare and then how that's slightly different from Copilot, but they kind of work together?
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone's used Bluebeam Review on this call, you may be familiar with a feature where you can actually overlay drawings to find out differences that have happened between different bulletins or issuances. Now think of Code Compare as a similar tool. When you click Code Compare, you select two publications. And when you hit compare, it actually compares those two publications by superimposing them. So for example, if I select on the left is the code book that I was using, which is a Michigan building code, on the right is a Kansas building code. When I hit compare, what it's doing is it's actually taking those two code books, laying them on top of each other, and then highlighting all the differences between the two code books. What's useful about this is, this may be in John's case when they're working across multiple jurisdictions, but even if you work in the same jurisdiction and there's code cycle updates, new codes come out, you don't want to spend time going through the entire hard copy code book, trying to find out differences by yourself. This does it in a really easy to do way. And the nice thing is you can have this up as a window in your office on a monitor. You can continue code compare as you're doing your research or as you're designing, and you have the old code there, you have the new code there, and all the differences are highlighted. So if you're familiar with one code and there's a new code, that's available to you as well. And what's nice is you can actually continue scrolling through the code books as you are running code compare. So you can change chapters, you can change sections, and code compare will just continue running. You don't have to stop comparing it. It's just a tool that will continue running on the side.
Awesome. John, this is a question for you. In your experience, John, how has Copilot been different from other LLM tools out there for your research?
I think just general ease of use overall, as well as um, lower learning curve for our team. We've got a fair amount of younger staff. So just kind of the way that this is set up overall, compared to some of the others out there in the industry, makes it very intuitive for our team, especially if they're not or have come from different industries where they're not used to having to do a search or having to do a code lookup. It sets it up very easily for them.
I think, John, you kind of touched on this, and so did Ninad, but I think you both have said to start, you can start very generic and then work your way down to more specific answers. But is there like a method to that? And maybe John, how have you kind of prompted Copilot to be more specific to your, like, what is that? Like, for example, how many questions does it take? Or like, what is the kind of general direction of the prompts that help you get to more specific answers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it ends up being conversational with the tool. I have an idea that I'm looking for something. Um, Again, going back to a specific piece of the energy code, or how would I implement a design option into that to follow the code? And then I've started it just kind of broad pictures. What systems would the code recommend for a 40,000 square foot elementary school? And then it kind of kicks out, 3 or 4 different options based on the codes for that area. And then I can say, okay, well, tell me more about this system. And then kind of continuing to use the tell me more approach as I, see that next answer and go, okay, tell me more about this part of that. And then tell me more about the next level down, and it continues to drill further into more detail and expand upon in greater detail each of those questions as you get further down into it. Some of that's a little bit easier to see once you kind of see it as an example. But kind of the one going back to the elementary school piece was kind of how we did it of, tell me some high level Indiana specific energy code pieces. Okay, what systems comply with this part of the energy code? Okay, now that I'm looking at that system type, tell me more about how somebody would implement a VAV air handling system, again, for a elementary school. Again, staying very high level with it, but it allows it to drill down to get to a lot of information very quickly.
Awesome. Yeah. And then one thing I'll just add at the end here, we're coming up on time, but if there's a certain set of code books or building typologies that you are researching in, you can actually just select those specifically. I think Ninad already showed this, but you can select those code books or select those building typologies and really fence in Copilot to be specific to your research, just as John is mentioning. So there are ways to kind of narrow Copilot a little bit at the start. You can go microscopic and start in a code section, or you can go more thematic and start with a more generic question. But there's all these tools we're continuing to add to the platform to make it more robust and easy to use for our users. Thank you, John and Ninad, for taking the time to present and answer. If anyone has more questions, please reach out to us at support@up.codes. As we come to a close, we want to remind you that to gain access to UpCodes Copilot, you'll need to subscribe to our professional plan. You can learn more about our paid offerings by visiting our pricing page or scanning the QR code that you see on the screen. If you've never ever tried our paid offerings before, you can always start with a 2-week free trial, which will give you some ample time to evaluate tools like Copilot or Code Calculator or even Code Compare that we saw today. And with that, thank you for joining us today. If you have, like I mentioned earlier, if you have any technical questions, you can reach out to us at support@up.codes. And a quick reminder that you'll receive a recording of this webinar after we conclude. John and Nad, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and present and share. We appreciate you, all of you, joining us today and spending time with us. Have a really great week ahead, and we'll see you next time.